Sports Network on this Christmas Eve. I'd like to welcome on my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm Sam McGinnis, one of your other co-hosts. A good show lined up for you today, and we're just going to get straight into it. We're going to start a little bit with our QB rankings that we're kind of finishing up after this long series of doing that.
We're going to wrap it up here. We got quite a few that we want to talk about, some of which we have some different opinions here. I think there are a lot of low-grade ones to get off with, and the first one on our list is Daniel Jones. And what do you think about Daniel Jones in New York?
I think he has done horrendously, mostly for the sake of his turnovers. I thought you were a little generous with your ranking when I saw it. So I think with that many turnovers, it's hard to put him very high.
You're giving him an F or a D-. I'm giving him a C- because I think the Giants are winning partially because of him. If you look at what they've done with Colt McCoy, they do, I think, the one win with him, but he's kind of held them back a little bit offensively. Daniel Jones gives him a little bit more. It's not a lot, but they give him just a little bit more. That sometimes puts them over the top in these close games.
Yeah, for me, this is the difference. This is the difference between an F that can throw the ball and an F that can't.
Yeah, basically, I think it is. I mean, I don't like him as a long term. I wouldn't want him to be the starter on my team, but I think he's better than a D for now.
Yeah, the Giants in scoring just doesn't seem to be much of a thing, does it?
No, it really doesn't. They've scored 13 points over the past 2 weeks or something like that.
Oh, that'd be bad in 1 week.
Yeah, no, you're right. They struggled to score. But speaking of teams that sometimes struggle to score, the Washington football team and Alex Smith, you were kind of harsh on Alex. You gave him a D+. Explain yourself.
Yeah, so again, the turnovers thing, and I think a lot of what Mike had to say has to go into account for the NFL show yesterday when he was talking about their front seven. How much of this is Alex Smith and how much of this is that defense? So, and if you really look at it, he's had a few turnovers in this mess.
Yeah, a lot of it is the defense. I think Alex Smith is more a game manager, but you look at it, 3 of those interceptions came the second game back from Major League Football against the New York Giants. If you eliminate that one game, his numbers already look that much better. And frankly, he's more of a game manager than he is a star player. But putting him down with a D+, putting him down, I would take him over Daniel Jones any day. So I think I gave him a C for my grade. I think he's been average. He's been nothing special. He's been about average. And there are teams like Washington that can succeed and can potentially make the playoffs with a guy like Alex Smith at the helm.
Yeah, and Alex Smith has the potential to return to his old form. It just might help if he actually had the rest of the offense.
Yeah, if he had some supporting pieces. I mean, Antonio Gibson's a good running back, but he's been hurt. They got Terry McLaurin's a good receiver. They have some weapons there. It's just not a full cast of guys.
Yeah, always helps when you're in Kansas City.
Yeah, or when you're in Seattle, because speaking of Seattle, we're talking about Russell Wilson next, and I think we both agree on this one. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He hasn't been an A+ this year, though. He opened up the year really well. But since then, he's had a lot of turnovers and been a little bit more uneven.
It's kind of making me think of a little bit of great analogy. I was going to say somebody from the NHL, but then I was like, that sort of works, but not really. Russell Wilson has been he's been pretty good. And the thing is although he's not in the MVP race, he's like the one step away from being MVP race. He won't be able to get there, but it's just one grade down from being considered to be the best quarterback in the NFL is not bad at all. And the only reason they really have a shot at the Super Bowl at all is because of him.
Exactly. That's when we give Russell Wilson a – like I said, he has the touchdown production. I think he still leads the NFL in passing touchdowns. But he also has a career high in interceptions this year. And to me, that unevenness, those interceptions, those turnovers are what keeping him from being an A+. But speaking of someone who has turnover issues and someone who's turning the ball over quite a bit, Jared, I think you were a little too generous with your grade here. You give him a B+.
Yeah, I actually think y'all are a little too harsh with him on the NFL show. I think he's done pretty well. It's nothing outstanding, but it's certainly better than average quarterback play.
Well, I mean, they just lost to the New York Jets, McGinnis. He's got 20 touchdowns and 12 interceptions this year. I don't think it's anything outstanding.
Can you take a guy for
What was
one
that?
game or even for a few games? If more games than not he's doing well, that's better than average right there.
All right, well, let me give you this stat. Goff has 37 giveaways since 2019. That's tied for the most in the NFL during that time. So this guy's a turnover machine again. This is not just one game. This is not just two games. This is a situation where he's turning the ball over like crazy, more than anyone else in the NFL. That's my problem with Jared Goff, and that's why he's never going to win a Super Bowl, even with a good defense.
Yeah, I remember thinking about him when we were coming into the Super Bowl when he was going to face the Patriots. And I remember thinking, he's young, he's new, there's no way they're going to win the Super Bowl as a result of that. And if he works out, I think if he does work out the turnover issues, he'll be a much better quarterback. But I do think he's done well. He just needs a little bit of help in that area. Also, how much is he
a lot of help in that area? I think he needs a lot of help in there. He doesn't need an offensive line. The offensive line does need work in Los Angeles. But speaking of someone who has a pretty solid offensive line, surprisingly, this year, Kyler Murray. And you and I both agreed that he deserves an A-. He's been electric for the Cardinals. Him and DeAndre Hopkins have connected immediately. And even though Larry Fitzgerald's getting phased out of the offense, they still have some good receiving options. And Kyler Murray, I think people overlook how much he's done this year because he has – I'll pull the numbers up right now. He doesn't have an outstanding number of passing touchdowns. He's kind of in the mid-20s as well.
Well, yeah, you got to do that with dual threat quarterbacks in general anyway. And there are more of those in the NFL now, so that stat needs to come more into play, I think.
Yeah, he has 741 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns, along with 3,600 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. So he's been great this year. He's got 4 game-winning drives, 3 fourth-quarter comebacks. Arizona's in position to make the playoffs. I think he has to have an A here. I don't think it's going to be a solid A. It's going to be an A- for me and A- for you as well. But I still think he's deserving of that grade.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, on to the next one. It's Nick Mullins. And you gave him a D. So you gave him basically the same grade. You gave him a higher grade than you gave Daniel Jones. I give him an F.
Yeah, Nick, I remember the first time, because I was actually watching the game where the first time Nick Mullins came out for the 49ers, back when, I think that was, last year when after Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. And he did phenomenal.
Was that 2 years ago?
That was 2 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm this is old. No. But he is like, I guess,
Yeah, Mullins, for me, the issue with him is the turnovers because he's got 12 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and he's lost the 49ers a lot of games this year. He really has. I mean, his turnovers have been one of the reasons why they've gone out there and they've had this losing streak here, despite having some success early on in Nick Mullins' time with the team. They won week 3, and then they kind of just fall apart. And a lot of it is Nick Mullins' turnovers, and it's not all his fault, Grant. They've had injuries everywhere on that team. You can't blame him solely for the issues. I think Nick Mullins is primarily responsible for a lot of the losses here down the stretch for the Niners.
He has been a very unfortunate piece to have. And frankly, the 49ers really don't have an answer at the QB position right now. Carson Wentz might be a good option for them in the future.
I think they would try to go for Stafford first if they can get him. That would be the one I think I would target.
Well, I might rather have Matthew Stafford than Carson Wentz because Carson Wentz is a turnover machine. But yeah, it really depends on what the perception is somewhat, because I think we can see how perception can kind of screw up reality a little bit. So it depends on who they think is the better QB, because you think Detroit, you don't really think good players generally outside of Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, and if you think there's a good player, they're generally tired before you can trade for them. So there's really no hope in looking for Detroit Lions players. Usually, to go to a quarterback who's in that division, Aaron Rodgers, you and I both gave him A+. Do you think Aaron Rodgers is going to win the MVP award?
Oh, absolutely. I don't understand how with 40 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, that is a 10-to-1 ratio, how you could not win the MVP. He also joins a fun stat, assuming he doesn't throw 4 picks in 2 games over the next couple. he will join himself twice as the only QB to have thrown for 40-plus touchdowns and less than 8 interceptions in a season. Or 8 or less, or something like that. So joining himself twice from 2011 2015. I don't remember exactly, but
2011 and 2016, but you were close there, so I'll give you points for that. He's been fantastic. Him and Devontae Adams obviously have been one of the best duos in football this year. He's in the NFL with a 118 passer rating. I know people love Patrick Mahomes. Frankly, I would love for Mahomes to win the award this year, and if he does, I won't complain. But Aaron Rodgers should be the guy. It should be Aaron Rodgers this year. He's proven it. He's played better than Patrick Mahomes this year. And if Mahomes had 3 interceptions, I probably would still lean towards him. But those interceptions really pushed him down the rankings, in my opinion. So I'm taking Aaron Rodgers over Mahomes for the MVP.
Yeah, and the other thing you have to consider is if you had to compare the weapons on Kansas City versus Packers, how much of a difference do you think it is? Do you think it's small, or would you put it at a bit of a larger stage?
Smaller than people realize, because you have Devontae Adams, who's arguably just as good, not better than Tyreek Hill. You have Robert Tonyan, who's leading the NFL, leading tight in receiving touchdowns this year. He's on Green Bay. Most people don't even know who he is. So you get that. He's not as good as Travis Kelce, don't get me wrong. But there's a huge gap between the two of them. But there is a good player that tight end spot for Green Bay. You have Aaron Jones at running back for Green Bay. He's better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who they have in Kansas City. And frankly, they have the best center right now, Corey Linsley, in Green Bay. And they have David Bakhtiari, one of the best left tackles. That offensive line in Green Bay is better than the one in Kansas City. I think it's obviously Kansas City is the better weapon, but it's much closer than people realize.
There you go. So you don't have to be too worried about that one considering the MVP at that point then.
No, you don't have to be too worried about comparing the weapons. Mitchell Trubisky, you gave him a B. I gave him a -. That's the next quarterback we're doing. And I was kind of surprised I gave him a B-. I wasn't expecting that. But he hasn't had a bad year if you look at the numbers. He's won a couple of games. I'm surprised with how well he's done this year. But should he keep his job? Should he stay in Chicago after the season?
I don't know if you can trust. So here's my thing on Mitchell Trubisky. Take not a part and apply it to the whole. Apply the whole to the part. He's had one good year, and it's not that great. He's had a little bit of a resurgence here in the second half of the season after getting benched for Nick Foles, who did horribly. But it's not like he's had a phenomenal year, and look at his other years. They're not good either. In fact, they're worse than this year was. I don't know. He's like, for me, I kind of compare him a little bit to Baker Mayfield, except Baker Mayfield is better. Where you remember where I was talking about how Baker Mayfield was more of kind of a serviceable quarterback. You could put him in, but he's never going to win you a whole crap ton of like playoff games or anything like that. So for me, Mitchell Trubisky might be the lowest version of acceptable starting quarterback in the NFL.
I can agree with that. I think at his best, Mitchell Trubisky is probably a starting quarterback. At his usual, he's probably a backup. I think he'll end up being like a Marcus Mariota with Las Vegas right now. Mariota is a high-paid backup who got in for Derek Carr this past week and his car got hurt. I think that's probably the path Trubisky's going to take. And if you're Chicago, I know you're probably getting tempted by how well he's playing at the end of the season. Don't do it to yourself. Just move on from Mitchell Trubisky. Start over again. Move on from Nick Foles if you can. Get a fresh start. That's what you deserve. That's what you should do. So I understand Trubisky's had a good end of the year. But if I'm Chicago, I'm not keeping him around.
Well, and it's interesting now. Having a backup quarterback that's actually legitimate is something you actually need in the NFL now with how much quarterbacks have been getting injured all the time. And if you actually have a decent backup quarterback like we saw the other day with the Raiders, you still got a shot to win some games.
Yeah, you do. I mean, we saw with the way Mariota performed, he positioned to win that game. Unfortunately, they came down to the wire there, and he did throw in late in the fourth quarter. I think that's the difference between starters and backups, is that sometimes backups will make mistakes in key situations, which is what happened with Marcus Mariota. But at the same point, you weren't going to be in that game otherwise without him on the field. He led the Raiders in rushing yards. So if you can have guys like him or Trubisky as backups, that's probably the ideal situation. Someone I wouldn't want as a backup, though, despite his storied passes, Nick Foles. And Nick Foles is someone else we graded. You gave him a D+. I just gave him a straight F. I mean, when I watched Nick Foles,
Nick Foles
right now, is Nick Foles right now is what Big Ben Roethlisberger is trending to be. A veteran quarterback getting paid a lot of money who can't push the ball downfield and who just can't make the offense move. And that's what my fear is with Ben Roethlisberger. He's going to end up being like that. And Nick Foles to me is the ultimate example of that because he can't move the ball downfield whatsoever.
He's getting nightmares of Mason Rudolph now.
You have no idea. I don't know.
You guys,
the Ben Roethlisberger situation is so weird.
You guys need to get a QB either in this draft or maybe there's another place for Carson Wentz to go is the Pittsburgh Steelers. But yeah, Nick Foles has been, I'm not sure it's quite accrediting an F, but it's certainly in the range.
Yeah.
Turnovers, can't move down the field. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just not. He looks too old. He's past the point where he can be a starting quarterback.
I'm not sure there was ever a time he could have been a starting quarterback. He reminds me, you know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of of Ryan Fitzpatrick.
No, Fitzpatrick's a more consistent starter than Nick Foles, but Foles had a Pro Bowl year.
It's the same type of on-off though, with starting and not and back up and then lighting it up and then having to go back. He reminds me a lot of Patrick.
Well, something that doesn't remind me of Ryan Fitzpatrick is Drew Brees, who we graded next. You gave him a solid A. I gave him an A-. He's been efficient this year. I think he's still leading the NFL in completion percentage, which is something he does every year at this point. Yeah, let me pull up the numbers real quick. He's got 21 touchdowns, only 4, so a fairly efficient year as well. But he did miss some time. I don't know. He's a good quarterback. He's still a very good quarterback, still a very efficient quarterback, but he's not throwing the ball downfield very much, which is why I can't give him an A. I'm giving him an A-.
I can see that as being fair. I will say, and I know he's coming off of injury, but even still, what did I say about Drew Brees at the end of seasons and heading into the playoffs? I'm concerned. His game against Kansas City was atrocious. Don't let the 3 touchdowns fool you. He was awful almost the whole game. He couldn't move the ball, kind of like Nick Foles. They got a lot of 3-and-outs or 1 first down, couldn't do anything. And man, he is not looking like himself.
I think part of that, though, is because you're just coming back from missing 4 or 5 weeks. I think once he gets back into the rhythm, he'll actually be better going off this year because he's going to have that rest. He's not going to be throwing for those weeks, not taking those hits.
Right. I hope you're right for all that's good. But I'm just a little concerned because you got to remember what happened last year, maybe the year before. I don't remember. But it's just, I don't trust him at the end of seasons.
No, I think there's some reason for that because he hasn't worked out for the past couple of years. Anyways, we're going to transition now to some NBA news if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Down here. As we're going to some NBA news, and it's interesting. The NBA started up officially, so the league is going right now. They started on December 22nd, and we got to see Kevin Durant play basketball for the first time about a year and a half after that Achilles tear. And football, I don't think there's an equivalent for football. Basketball, the Achilles tear is usually like the nail in the coffin for most careers of NBA players. But it looks like medical science might have pushed past that at this point. Kevin Durant comes out 25 minutes, 22 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, a block. And he had a couple of dunks, too. I didn't think it was going to be as explosive as he looked. So I'm very excited to see where this goes from here. The Brooklyn Nets looked like a really good team. The Golden State Warriors did not look like a really good team, which is also surprising. But the NBA's opened up. The NBA started off. Jason Tatum hit a game against Giannis in the Bucks last night. And there's so much going on. And then we have a loaded slate of Christmas Day games tomorrow. The Pelicans, Heat, Warriors, Bucks, Nets, Celtics, Mavericks, Lakers, and Clippers, Nuggets. So I'm getting excited here, McGinnis. NBA season is completely upon us.
Yes, he's getting giddy. It's kind of what will happen when the NHL season finally gets to where we're at. But I watched a little bit of the opening day Clippers-Lakers game, and that was interesting because the Clippers were in control for pretty much the whole game.
There was a period, I believe, in the fourth quarter where it came down to maybe a 2-score difference, 4 or 6 point difference. There was a time where it narrowed. which is usually what happens in NBA games. Actually, usually the first half of the NBA games don't actually matter. It's the second half where things get clear. Everyone goes on a run at some point. Clippers, I agree. The Clippers look much more dominant than the Lakers. And it doesn't really, I don't want to read too much into one game, but it could be a little bit of the fatigue from going so deep into the playoffs and having to win a championship and then turn around after a very short offseason. But we'll find out as the year goes on. The Clippers are going to be very good this year. The Lakers are going to be very good. It's going to be fun to watch out how the Western Conference plays out.
Yeah, and that's a rivalry that's going to be fun to watch too, because just of how good both those teams are. You could see maybe, depending on how many times they play each other, you could have a situation in which they tie up in a season series. And then if they end up making the playoffs and end up having to play each other, you could see that play out too. So that could be a very good rivalry.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on. But we're going to quickly transition into your NHL news and predictions. So you got some big NHL news here for the first time in a little while.
I've got good news. The NHL schedule, they have something that's actually solid, sort of. Because for whatever reason, the governments are like, you should like bubble, or maybe you should try and like just wait for a while before starting the season. But the NHL released a schedule anyway, which does not hurt my feelings. Something to note for the entire regular season, you can look at whatever division you're in, and those are the only teams you are playing the whole season. So keep that in mind. If you're particularly good against those teams, you might have a better regular season than you normally would have. But minus that, I kind of want to move here into a little bit of predictions of what the new Central Division is, and then we'll get a little bit to how their formatting is going to work. So the teams here are the – pardon me. Go ahead.
I was going to say, hit us with it.
All right, so the teams here are the Panthers, Blue Jackets, Hurricanes, Stars, Lightning, Predators, Blackhawks, and Red Wings. So those are the teams in the division, and I think I have to start out here with the obvious number one has to be the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're the best team on paper and in reality, so it's pretty easy to put them here. The Stars at number two, this is going to be fun to watch. These two teams just got done playing a Stanley Cup. Now they're in the same division and play each other like 8 times this year. You could see a serious rivalry there brewing just from the pain of losing a Stanley Cup.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about so often with football and sports with revenge games for one year to the next, and now you're going to sit 8 times in a year. That's going to be something to watch. And I'm sure there's going to be some emotions or heated emotions on both sides.
Typically, the times. So now, even and they're normally not even in the same conference, so they would only play each other 2 times. We would only get to see this twice. But now you could have a situation in which it gets heated throughout the playoffs, or pardon me, throughout the regular season, and then going into the playoffs.
Something to watch. I mean, if they meet in the playoffs again, even after all that, that'd be something that probably the series everyone would be waiting for all year long. I don't think you could top that. And looking through the rest of these teams up here, is there anyone that could disrupt these number 1, number 2 teams, or is it just going to be 1, 2, and then everyone else?
I think it's more likely to be 1, 2, and everyone else, because I think the Stars are definitely a very good team still. They've got great goaltending still. They got great defense. If they can somehow, again, figure out the scoring that they kind of had for a little bit of the playoffs this year, they'll even be a better team than they were last year. But I think next up, the Hurricanes, they're a pretty complete team, minus maybe the goaltending position. They've got a good offense. They got a good defense. There's not a whole lot here to complain about. There's a little bit of stall out. It's like on paper, you would think this should be a really good team, but then in reality, it change up. But that may have been because they were in the Metropolitan. Maybe they'll have a better time now that they're not in a division like that.
Well, and you mentioned there's basically 1, 2, and everyone else. So if the Hurricanes struggled because they were playing tough competition all last year, maybe this is the division outside of those 2 really tough teams, you can pick up some wins against everyone else. We have number 3. I'm at number 4. You have the Blue Jackets at number 4. Are they even a threat here in this situation? Because I know you said it's 1 else. Are they even really in contention here, or is this just like cannon fodder for top 3 teams in this division?
Actually, I wouldn't call them cannon fodder. Heck no. I would not Blue Jackets can be a team and also disappoint you at the same time. They're kind of a weird spark that way. I will say I did do a little bit of a poll on Twitter the other day, and I was a little curious about this because the Jackets could be a little bit of a dark horse contender for the Cup. A few other people thought so as well. So I could see this because they're close to having a complete team in a situation in which they could be much better than they are. And again, the addition of Max Domi is nice, but it's nowhere near enough. I want to put into perspective just how bad the Blue Jackets offense was last year. And this, partially had to do with injuries. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, who scored 49 points, was their leading scorer. The average scoring Jets had 5 players, 5 that were ahead of him in points. Also, there were 70 players with 50 or more points. The Blue Jackets had none of them. The Blue Jackets were 20 goals for that year. So if they stay healthy and Max Domi produces high end, maybe it improves a little bit. But with offense that's that terrible, I mean, you just got to understand, to win games, you actually have to, score,
Shocking. McGinnis breaks news. To win games, you have to put the puck in the back of the net.
No way. It's a new concept. And number 5, I've got the Panthers, but this is an interesting one. Because this one, 100% wrong about. So I kind of looked back. The Panthers struggled against some of the higher-end teams who last year. But what happens if Bobrovsky turns back into that Vezina-caliber goalie he was on the Jackets? You could see a much better Panthers team. And at the same time, if we were talking about if the Hurricanes struggle, you could almost see a situation in which these two teams flip. So something to keep an eye on.
The Hurricanes don't score the Hurricanes don't score a lot. So if you get him to come back and be a great goalie suddenly, now you got a good goalie versus a team that doesn't score a lot of points. You would think that would have the option to flip these two teams around.
Well, the Hurricanes are all right in scoring, but I think you were talking Jackets there and just got your.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, my bad, Jackets. Yeah.
You're fine. You're fine. But yeah, I could see a situation in which the Hurricanes stall out, Bobrovsky gets hot, and they flip. But another interesting rivalry storyline there is Bobrovsky, your old goaltender, you now get to play 8 times.
Yeah, that'll be a matchup that everyone's going to want to see. Is there any bad blood there, or is it just business is business and you end up switching teams eventually?
I would more is it's a little bit of both, because there was a little bit of between Bobrovsky and the organization, but I feel like between the players, it's not a big of a deal.
And I think that's how it usually is. Usually, and a lot of times it's the players in the organization that actually have beef across all sports. So you got top 5 said Stars, Hurricanes, Jackets, Predators, and Blackhawks next to them.
Yeah. So Blackhawks could very well be headed into a rebuild. So I could even this is odd. I never thought I would have the confidence to say this, but I could actually be wrong about the Red Wings. They could pass the Blackhawks potentially. Odd as that is, and I'm not the only one that thinks the Red Wings could potentially be slightly more competitive this year. It makes me a little bit more happy. But I think the Predators, so you got to put them at 6, but they're not going to be particularly good this year. I think they're really past their prime years, and it's going to stay that way. The Blackhawks headed into a rebuild, literally don't even have a goalie. They got rid of their goalies for whatever reason. And then the Red Wings just got a new goalie in Thomas Greiss. They got Bobby Ryan. They're slightly improved from what they were last year and should be, hopefully. I don't know. They could still be the worst team in the NHL, but if they are, it won't be by the same margin.
If they were, that'd be funny. But
for you,
got a chance for you. But a chance for the Red Wings to climb up in the NHL. Talking about the Blackhawks, and you got the Red Wings, of course, right below them in the States. You say it's close. I mean, the Red Wings won 17 games last year. Blackhawks won 32. That still seems like a significant gap here.
There is, but look at the difference. Why did they win those 32 games? Wait a minute. They had Robin Lehner and Corey Crawford. They have neither of those goalies now, both of whom are good goalies. Okay, Robin Lehner is Vezina candidate this year under the Vegas Golden Knights. Corey Crawford won't be, but he's not a bad goalie. He's a good veteran. We don't have either of those guys now. You really think they'll win the same number of games without goaltending like that?
Probably not, if I'd take a guess.
And Thomas Greiss, a good goaltender, comes to Detroit. The goaltending could be the difference here.
Especially you switch and get those two out, and then there's a chance here, I suppose. But it's Detroit, though, so do you really think that it's going to happen this year? You might have to wait 1 or 2 more years here just because it's Detroit.
I think you might have to wait 1 or 2 more years, but the fact of the matter is Steve Yzerman has improved this team, and next year could be the looking for some big fish year for Steve Yzerman. For the first couple, 2-3 years he's been here, he's been kind of biding his time, kind of letting the team do what they do. He got this. He could start getting things going next year. So, and most see him as a pretty good manager to this point. So this is actually one of those situations where the rebuild could actually come out with some significance on the other side. Yeah,
and the rebuild means you won't be available for the playoffs probably this year, but I
absolutely.
believe you have some interesting news about the playoffs this season and how the format might.
Yeah, so the format is pretty simple. It's straightforward. The top 4 teams in each division make it. There's no wild card. So it's the top 4 from each division. The 1 seed plays the 4 seed in your division, and the 2 plays the 3. So you will have more in-division games, and then the winners of those play each other. So this is in-division play for the first 2 rounds. But this is where it gets interesting. The final 4 teams from each division, the final 4 teams remaining, get reseeded. So you could potentially have a situation in which 2 used to be Eastern Conference teams play each other in the Stanley Cup. You could have a matchup that you could never have in a normal regular season. Like we could have a Boston Bruins Tampa Bay Lightning matchup.
Hey, why not though? I mean, is that a situation where you might get the 2 best teams in the National Hockey League then?
Yes,
because I know sometimes you don't always get that.
Yes, if I'm understanding this right, because they said it would be a reseed, so it depends on whether if that's regular season or playoffs. But yeah, if they truly do reseed these, you could have a situation in which if Boston is 1 and Tampa Bay is 2, and they win both their series, where you could end up having a never would have happened Stanley Cup.
It'll be interesting to get some new matchups in there for the finals. But speaking of finals where we won't have, or probably won't have any new matchups, college football news. So they gave us the college football playoff selection committee.
It's Clemson and Alabama again.
Shocker. The college football playoff selection committee named its top 4 teams. Number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Clemson. 3, Ohio State. And 4, Notre Dame. Obviously, it's not without controversy because Ohio State's played 6 games. They've beaten Northwestern and Indiana. Those are the only 2 competent teams they played this entire year. They stuck Cincinnati, who's undefeated at 9-0 at number 8 behind Texas A&M, Oklahoma, who doesn't have a defense, and Florida, who doesn't have a defense. So Cincinnati gets shafted here in the end. Texas A&M is at number 5. Notre Dame barely sneaks in. I don't know why Oklahoma's at number 6, but they are for some reason. I guess it's because they do have a conference championship game. But it's getting kind of old here, McGinnis. I mean, Clemson and Notre Dame have played each other twice already this year. They don't play each other in the first round of the college football playoffs, but they are both in the top 4. You're going to have a matchup between Clemson and Ohio State, by the way, played in the first round last year. So it's a rematch of last year's first round. Notre Dame plays Alabama. And should Alabama win, it's going to be Alabama-Ohio State or Alabama-Clemson. It feels like we're down to basically 3 teams every year, plus an extra one. It's almost always Alabama-Ohio State, Clemson.
Yeah, that's basically the reality of the situation is Alabama and Clemson are the 2 best teams, but Ohio State has the ability to sneak in. Notre Dame does not have the ability to sneak in. They're going to get rolled by Alabama. So the real question
I think so. That's where I think it's going.
So is it Alabama-Clemson or is it Alabama-Ohio State? Like this is like what happened when Golden State and LeBron basically just ended up meeting for the 4 straight years. It's not quite that bad, but it's not far from.
Yeah, Clemson. This is the. Am I doing the math? This is the 3rd year in a row. What if they win? If they beat Ohio State, which I'm assuming they. This will be the 3rd year in a row. that they make the college football playoff final. They actually play for the national championship game. And as you know, they had 1 year off where they Kelly Bryant as the quarterback. They had 1 year where they didn't make it. And then Deshaun Watson, they made it twice in a row, and they played Alabama both times. So it's at a point now where Alabama, Clemson, it seems like an almost yearly staple of the college football playoffs, and it tells you just how much power is constantly these top teams in college football.
Yeah, if you get a really good recruiting staff and you've got all the right pieces, you can really be one of those top 2-3 teams. Because really, yeah, outside of the top 3, there was really nobody who can win a championship in this college football league.
Yeah. Which actually transitions into one of my questions on our next segment, thinking or dreaming. So I'm actually going to start here, McGinnis, because I have one that kind of connects to our previous conversation. The college football playoff needs to be expanded as we keep having the same teams every year. So before you give me a response here, my logic here is that if you expand it to like 8 teams in, there's a chance maybe there'll be an upset somewhere along the line, and you won't have the same teams play each other in the finals every year.
I would do it anyway just because it's fun. I would like to see more teams. I think the reality is it would be more likely for you to still see the same thing anyway, but at least you'd get other matchups to watch that might actually be interesting and exciting until, the last couple of games. So
yeah, I wanted to see.
You don't need to, but it would be nice if you did.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to see Alabama. I wanted to see Alabama or Clemson roll over Cincinnati so I could rub it in Mike's face. He keeps telling me about how they should make the college football playoffs. And frankly, I looking back on the schedule, he kept arguing they have a good strength of schedule. They didn't. They didn't play anyone who really mattered. So I want to see Cincinnati play a tough team that has a top 3 recruiting class, and I want to see how that plays out, but we won't get it this year.
You wanted to pin them up against Alabama. That's mean.
Hey, Mike's saying they should make the college football playoffs. You're saying that they should be able to play Alabama and not get rolled over by 50 points.
Yeah, no, that's no. They would die.
You're absolutely right. They would. And I hope Mike heard that. The Detroit Lions, my next question for you is the Detroit Lions are still 2 years away from being competitive.
I have a problem with that logic because you're assuming the Lions will ever be competitive.
That's the response I was hoping for, McGinnis.
So, no, this is 100% dreaming because they will never be seriously competitive in any way, shape, or form. Maybe a fringe playoff contender once in a while, and then they'll just lose in the first round as a wild card. So, no. There's no way that's ever happening.
That's fairly straight to the point there, McGinnis, from a Detroit Lions fan. But I think you got 2 proposals for me here.
Yeah, okay. So the first one I want to throw at you here is Matthew Stafford will be traded next year. Speaking of the Lions.
So do you mean this offseason?
Either this offseason or during next
year. Okay. Yeah, this is thinking. I can understand this happening because you're going to get a new general manager and a new head coach in Detroit. They may want to just start over, and Kenny Galladay might be a free agent or might be 1 year from being a free agent. You're probably not going to pay him. He's your star receiver. So I think they could just hit this whole reset button here. So the defense, let's be honest, the defense is already reset. The defense is already terrible. And if you're looking at the offense, there's only a couple of star pieces there. Yeah, there's only a couple of star pieces that cost a lot of money on the offense, and Stafford is one of them. So if you're going to hit the reset button, Stafford move on. There will be plenty of teams willing to give up first-round picks for Matt Stafford. Trust me. So I think this is thinking. There's absolutely a chance Stafford gets traded here, especially it helps Detroit rebuild.
I want the Saints is, again, this is the absolute best case scenario. Being able to see actually get his real chance is the Saints.
Probably. That's probably the best landing spot. I don't think it will happen.
No.
But you could go to the Saints. You might get New England. The Patriots might buy in.
The Broncos or New England might be the most likely out of that.
Yeah. Probably, because you have to find a team that has the cap space to be able to do it.
How much cap space do the Saints even have?
Probably not a lot, but if Drew Brees retires, you'll have a lot more room.
That's true. That's true. You do have to deal with those great defensive players and Alvin Kamara, though. So
yeah, you won't be able to keep all of them, but you'll be able to keep a lot of them. So
there you go. All right, I'll move on to my second one here. Let me see if I can. So with the NHL playing so many games within the division, we get to see these people play each other 8 times. Could this lead to easier playoff predictions if it's slanted? If the wins are,
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no because you're going to eventually run into an opponent that you've never played before this year. So that's going to be the interesting part because you are eventually going to teams that you've never played, and so that will be the fun part. So I think initially it'll be easier to predict, but afterward, once you start getting to the point where it's the seeding is a little bit tricky, and you're playing teams that you haven't played in the regular season 8 times in a row. Once you get to that point, it's going to be impossible to predict them because you haven't seen these two teams match up. You have no idea how they'll play out. So I think this is partially thinking, but also I think towards the end it's not going to matter as much. It's going to be much crazier and much more hectic.
Yeah, so you could have a situation in which the first 2 rounds you predict it nearly perfectly, and then the second 2 rounds you can't predict anything because these teams have literally not played each other once in the whole regular season.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's going to be very difficult to be able to predict that accurately once you reach that point in the season.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, especially with playing a team so many times. I might get to see my Red Wings play 8 times this year.
You might. It'd be very interesting to see how it all works out. I think we have maybe one final segment here. Do you want to do this Christmas one?
Yeah, so we got a little bit of a Christmas thing. I was hoping you would add a couple, but if
I can add a couple on the fly here. I can do a few on the fly.
All right. So, Christmas Day, what would be, or around Christmas, would be the best present for each of these teams or players? And I'm saying Saints Drew Brees, just for him to do better this week, would be his own Christmas present, because coming off of an injury and then doing poorly is kind of scary.
Yeah, I don't think you will, because you get hit. You have to go out there. You have to take those hits and kind of get adjusted to playing. It's a little bit harsh. It's a little bit difficult at first, but I think he will play better. It's not going to be a Christmas miracle if he gets better. He's a good quarterback. He's a quality quarterback. You just can't ask him to do too much. And I expect that he will do well behind a Saints offensive line, which is one of the best in the NFL.
Well, there you go. And then this one I think is kind of funny. Jets fans hope that the Jaguars win a game or 2 before the season is out so they can get Trevor Lawrence anyway.
You know what? On the other side of things, the Jaguars are hoping for 2 consecutive losses so they can make sure they get Trevor Lawrence.
Or actually, the Jags would almost hope that the Jets start winning games. So
yeah, that would help out as well. Either one of those.
Your Christmas presents are very much so depending as fans here.
Yeah, it's looking for the next guy for the heir to whatever you have there already. I do have one Christmas wish for a guy like James Harden, who has made clear he wants out of Houston. He wants out of Houston contender. His Christmas wish would be to trade to a team capable of winning an NBA Finals. It's never going to happen. He's going to be stuck in Houston for a while, but that's his hope.
You're making me think too much of Matthew Stafford now. Straight up, he could win a Super Bowl if he was on the right team, just like James Harden could win a championship if he was on the right team.
I don't know about that. James Harden and me, I don't know if there's ever going to be a right team for James Harden to win an NBA Finals on.
If you got the right pieces, I think you could.
Maybe. He would probably, but James Harden would have to be like the number 2 or number 3 option. I don't think he could be the number 1.
Well, but even still, if you've got 2 to 4 stars on an NBA team, you can pretty much say you've got a shot. But there are only a few NBA teams that say they have a true star of that many. And James Harden could be a second or third star on a legitimate championship team.
I could see him being the second one, but I don't think he could be the primary guy. If you're the primary guy and you're James Harden, we've seen it happen multiple times with Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, Dwight Howard. It never works out. So I think you need someone like a Durant or a LeBron, someone who's going to be willing to take charge number 1 to get Harden to a NBA Finals.
Well, there you go. And that's our Christmas Day in the sports world.
Yeah, a nice little short segment to wrap it up there. So we are, again, filming this on Christmas Eve, obviously. And we would love, for our Christmas gift, how about you like the video on Facebook and go check out some of our previous shows that we've done in the past. Maybe go check out some of our content on our Facebook page or on the website. Appreciate it. You can follow The Grueling Truth at the Grueling Truth, or on Facebook where we have all of our shows and everything posted. McGinnis, you're lagging a little bit here. Is there anything else you want to do here before we wrap the show up?
Here, I don't think there's anything else of the NHL season. I'm hoping again. I'll keep everybody updated on my Twitter. What's up with the NHL show and how that's going to be going moving forward. But I'll make sure you guys can at least get to that when we start doing it again. And hopefully it'll be soon here because there's actual NHL stuff we can go into now. And eventually that may be something we can do outside of the Sam and Sam show also.
Yeah, so why don't you tell people where they can follow you on Twitter for those updates on the NHL show?
So you can find me at SamuelMCG22. I'm kind of wondering because I've said Samuel McG because you say McGinnis in my last name. So I'm wondering how many people, like, for whatever reason, couldn't do that. Because I've had that happen before where somebody's like, but I looked it up and it's like, it's not because you spelled it wrong. It just sound it out in your head. McG, it's not that hard.
It's like McDonald's easily. It should be easy.
It should
All
be
Americans know what McDonald's is.
MCG, it's not hard.
Exactly. And you can follow me at Sam_Teets33 on Twitter. So make sure to check us out for our articles, content, and updates on the NHL show. I'm sure McGinnis will get that going at some point. And I'll be back on later today for the NFL show with Mike Goodpaster. We'll run through some of our predictions for the upcoming games this weekend. But for now, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays from us at The Grueling Truth. We hope to see you all next week when we have our next Sam and Sam show back on Friday as usual. We'll see you all then.